Can we get a Vermont? Unlikely. He shot! Why did you shoot, brother? Oh. Oh! I'd be so mad. Bro, I would be so mad about that. Oh, the overmatch, yeah. We get him, though. Yo, 208,000 damage? How busted. Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at a brand new premium cruiser from Italy. This is the Messina. It's got 152mm main guns with SAP and, of course, beautiful exhaust smokes alongside some very devastating torpedoes. I had a lot of fun going for those YOLO torp rushes here. Our concealment is okay, and if this is already reminding you of another premium Italian ship at Tier 9, well, you'd be correct. Gonzaga is another version of this ship, light cruiser with very powerful torpedoes alongside these exhaust smokes. It leads to a very fun playstyle. Now this ship is available exclusively in loot boxes, and not just any loot boxes, but nested loot boxes. The Nians treasure containers, I'm not going to go over that in this video. We did that yesterday already. If you want to hear my take on it, go watch that video. I will link it in the description down below. But safe to say, it's very expensive and not at all worth engaging with, unfortunately. We will hopefully see these ships back at the end of the year, though. I do want to mention that as a hopeful note, I guess. Something similar to the Steel Will event. Should see Messina as well as the other two new options in this Lunar New Year. Unfortunate, though, we gotta wait like a whole year for that. I really hate it. Okay, before I go on another rant about gambling, let's talk about Messina and the gameplay, because that's what I want to do. I would much rather make gameplay-focused videos and discuss how these ships play. So, SAP is very, very good, guys. This is one of the best ammo types in the game, combining the alpha damage of armor piercing with the consistency of high explosive. And you get a lot more pen than the HE, so most of the time you're doing way more damage than the HE does, even with fires, usually. This ship does have 217,000 SAP DPM, which is pretty good, considering the Brindisi, which is the tech tree tier 9 cruiser, has only 187,000 SAP DPM. So a little better DPM here, although we are squishier. The armor here is not nearly as good. And of course, we don't have as much pen. So the SAP shells here have 42mm of pen, which is more than enough for most instances, but Brindisi gets up over 50. It's 54mm of pen there. And that's really important, as there's a lot of problem battleships at this tier and on tiers above that have 50mm of armor plating. Getting through that is really useful. So 42 is still nice. Something like Valparaiso, you can still full pen in its upper belt and deck armor, but not quite some of the other ships like Libertad, for example. This ship's concealment is fine at 11.3, but nothing too spectacular, I would say. It's kind of maybe the weak point of this ship. We get a lot of HP, though, which I really like. Solid amount of healing and great turning circle radius. So as I was playing this ship, I realized, much like a lot of these Italian cruisers, they turn really, really well once you get them turning. 680-meter turning circle radius is better than a lot of destroyers a lot of the time, but a 10.5-second rudder felt a little bit slow. So I'm actually running rudder mod here instead of prop mod, and that felt great. I was able to dodge fairly regularly a lot of incoming battleship fire, even, 12 to 15 kilometers away. I had a pretty good time here. I had fun trying to use these torpedoes as a full YOLO ship. It's not got the greatest DPM potential. I mean, sometimes you're just going to shatter like that on gun turrets, and not getting the HE fires against especially up tiers, that is a lot of your damage source. So unfortunately, we're not as good in those situations. But if you can push, there's a lot of fun to be had here, because these torpedoes do a monstrous amount of damage, up at 20,433 alpha damage, which is way more than we get on Brindisi. That one's only got 13,900 alpha damage. Although Brindisi Torps go further, 13.5 kilometer range on Brindisi. Here we only get 8 kilometers of range. So no stealth torping here, none of that. You really do have to plan your strike around islands or using this exhaust smoke generator. The Torps are really, really nice though. They do reload a little slow at 147 seconds, but 72 knots, high alpha damage means you're really using them for these dedicated YOLO rushes most of the time. So it's not really about the DPM in my eyes. These consumables, though, you only get 2 smokes base, unfortunately, but these smokes last 40 seconds as well as a cooldown time of 150 seconds, which is a little slow at times, but you should be using these smokes to cover yourself in open water farming positions or to get you into cover. It's also a great way to go dark and turn away if you get caught bow in. I really like having exhaust smoke generators. Or you could use them aggressively to push into positions that maybe you otherwise shouldn't. But that's a little bit more advanced play. Typically use them defensively, and I think you're going to have a better time with this ship. Notably, we also get a hydro here, which is quite unique for Italian cruisers. They don't really get a hydro or a radar, so very nice to have a 6-kilometer hydro here. Yeah, 6 kilometers. Very same as we see on a lot of the German high-tier cruisers. That's extremely valuable for island play, YOLOing around islands, or sometimes pushing destroyers in their smoke screens. The SAP does absolutely ridiculous damage into DDs. As we all know, playing against Venezia is very, very scary. I took a look at that ship recently. The alpha damage there is wild. And here we only get 9 guns, right? So it's not quite as monstrous alpha damage as we see on Brindisi or Venezia, but we're shooting way more often is the key here. So even if certain salvos aren't quite as impactful, having SAP more often is very, very solid. However, you've probably already thought that the comparison to Brindisi is maybe not the best for Tier 9 Italian cruisers. Yes, Gonzaga, that's the one we should be comparing to. That ship is similar in that it has smaller caliber guns with a faster reload. It also has these extreme alpha damage torpedoes and has 1 more smoke screen. Instead of 2 base, you get 3 smokes base. Light cruiser as well. That one gets the 135mm main guns off of the destroyers, and you actually do get 12 of them there. Here we only get 9, but they're 152mm. There's a small difference in pen there. Not a whole lot. I will say, though, the Messina guns have way better shell velocity. I thought that Gonzaga was fun, but a little hard to play, a little hard to lead those guns. And a nice advantage here is that, let's say out to 15 kilometers, Messina has an 8.2 second flight time. It's pretty comparable to Brindisi, around 8 seconds there. So very nice flight times here, very comfortable to lead these main guns. Gonzaga is like 11.6 seconds at 15 kilometers. Much, much more difficult to lead those main guns. However, okay, if you can lead those main guns and you can keep it alive, because Gonzaga has much less HP, 34,100 HP on Gonzaga, where Messina gets 43,600 base. So a little easier to keep this one alive, a little easier to aim. But the DPM, okay? 285,000 SAP DPM when it comes to Gonzaga, where Messina only has 217,000. So a midpoint between Brindisi and Gonzaga, but certainly closer to Brindisi. It still does great damage overall. It just takes a little bit longer to get there. It's not going to feel like a SAP DPM monster. It's just going to feel fine, in my opinion. It takes a while to actually rack up quite a lot of damage with these main guns. And since we only have 9, it feels like worse dispersion. It isn't. It's still just cruiser dispersion, but 9 guns versus having 12 guns, just the volume of fire makes up for a lot of dispersion issues we may find with just less shells. So when it comes to the main guns, it's a little easier to lead, a little bit more reliable to hit these main guns, but you're just not getting quite as much DPM as you would get on Gonzaga. Keeping them alive is similarly difficult. Gonzaga HP, as mentioned already, is a problem. Where Messina, it's a concealment. 11.3 kilometers best conceal on this ship is tough, okay? That's a little bit tough when Gonzaga's best conceal is down around 9 kilometers. So that ship chooses when it engages much more than Messina. This one can get caught off guard at times, and here I'm actually running a Lighthouse build, so I had to try out to buff the gun DPM as much as I could. If I'm going to complain about Messina DPM versus Gonzaga, we should try it with the full build, and it was a little bit better, admittedly. But we also need to consider the upgrade heavy HE and SAP shells. This is going to buff our alpha damage on our SAP, which is very, very useful. However, it has a downside. If you have greater than 149mm main guns, you get a 15% penalty to your concealment, which is nice when you're trying to run a Lighthouse build and make use of upgrades and skills that give you benefits for being spotted or enemies to be within your detection range. But you don't always want that in a light cruiser in these up tiers, certainly. There's that turning circle radius coming in handy. It really does turn on a dime. It's crazy what some of these Italian cruisers have. But we don't always want to be spotted, right? We have the smokes, but sometimes those smokes aren't going to be up. Having a 9-kilometer detect feels great on Gonzaga. Harder to lead those main guns, sure, but you can choose many more of your engagements, which I really personally liked. And yet, you get less HP. You get a few more second chances with Messina. Although, considering the armor profiles get overmatched everywhere by a lot of the higher tier battleships, maybe not so much. There's large citadels involved here, so if you get caught, you're probably going to go down very quickly, no matter what, even if you do have 45 to 50k HP versus the 40 or so that you would have on Gonzaga with a full build. Now, you do actually lack quite a bit of range on Gonzaga. That ship only has 13.8 kilometers range, so it really needs that improved concealment to make it work at all. But even if you have the good concealment, you just can't always push up. Sometimes in these high tier games, I'm sure you've experienced it yourself, it's pretty passive these days. So having a base range of 16.8 on light cruiser guns is extremely useful. More comfortable to play. If you found Gonzaga too difficult to play, Messina gives you the Italian light cruiser playstyle that's a little bit easier, a little more comfortable. Maybe not as powerful in its extreme, but easier to make use of, which I think is worth seeing. Maybe not worth picking up for this absurd price. I'm not going to go on a rant again, but I gotta make this very clear. I do not recommend you gamble for these containers. Nested containers is crazy to me. We'll also talk about the price of Gonzaga, because that ship is currently in the armory, and if you have that 25% off coupon, it recharges every once in a while. It's like 13 to 14,000 doubloons there. Much, much better value there, although it is quite a bit harder to play. As for these torpedo YOLOs, or playing aggressive, okay? Consumables matter a lot in these situations. Having a hydro is just very good, assuming you remember to use it before the torpedoes get there. Okay, we all make mistakes. Caught, you got me. Hey, that's the HP pool coming in handy there. We're allowed to make a few more mistakes. 6-kilometer hydro will help us to deal with this enemy destroyer. It's not looking so good for our team, but maybe we can take a few trades on the way out. Gonzaga gets a massive engine boost, 20% engine boost instead. So one more smoke on Gonzaga, and you get a very powerful engine boost, but no hydro. And hydro is very useful for getting into some of these crazy situations where you're trying to YOLO an enemy battleship or cruiser, and they're not spotted by your team. Well, you can spot them for yourself. That's really valuable. You can also try and push some enemy destroyers in their smokes. That's also extremely valuable. However, getting into these positions can be quite difficult. Again, your concealment disadvantage at the start. So 11.3, they're going to know you're coming a lot sooner than Gonzaga, but less team play required in that regard. By the way, I don't know how I survived that Vermont salvo. I'm going to get absurdly lucky here. This is legitimately just paper light cruiser armor here for the most part, with a massive... How did I live that? We're getting very, very lucky here in this battle. But the torpedo damage is very, very nice. Gonzaga, though, gets those same torpedoes out to 10 kilometers. We do, however, get one more per side. So if we are doing these mega YOLO plays, it's more valuable to have that extra bit of alpha damage, even if it doesn't quite go as long range. Gonzaga, though, throws those torps out as YOLO torps, right? Because that 9-kilometer best detect, we can't do that here, unfortunately. So a little bit less useful. I think the torpedoes on Gonzaga are much easier to get better value out of. A little bit of an inverse of the survivability as well as the main guns on these two ships, but still very difficult, of course, to make use of torps in 2026 World of Warships. People tend to kite away, right? Let's be honest. People aren't really pushing in these days. So I would value the consistency of main guns, especially if you're not as comfortable with playing cruisers or squishy light cruisers. Maybe Messina is an interesting look for you if Gonzaga is a little bit too challenging. But if you really like having the light cruisers that do a ton of damage output if you get them in the right situation, but explode if you play poorly, I tend to enjoy that playstyle, a little bit of higher risk, higher reward. It's where Lighthouse builds come from too. A lot of the time, I will enjoy that much more. The higher peaks, I guess, I am a big fan of. Again, getting very lucky against this Vermont here. But we are going to make use of this torpedo alpha damage and the 1 extra torp per side. Having only 3 per side probably wouldn't have actually finished off this Vermont. We don't, however, pen Vermont upper belts. We have to hit into his superstructure if we actually want to deal damage with our sap. That's the big deal here is the mainline cruisers, Italian cruisers, they would actually be able to full pen the belt armor here and maybe get a little more damage. Superstructures tend to saturate. I probably should have shot the bow or stern though in this situation. I will say though, the torp angles are a little awkward. I should have died there, okay? I don't know how I didn't, but I definitely should have. And avoiding some of the other incoming damage at range because we turn so quickly here. Firing angles on the torps are bad on both of these ships, by the way. 32 degrees forward, but 48 degrees backwards on Messina. And Gonzaga is 26 forward and 30 backwards, so a lot easier to make use of. But the inverse is true on the main guns. Gonzaga has, unfortunately, 37 degree forward angles and 36 degree rear angles, where Messina here, on its main guns, has 30 forward and 31 backwards. Yeah, most of the damage in that 200k game was from those YOLO torpedoes. Not a normal example, but had a lot of fun there regardless. So definitely a different playstyle feeling than something like Brindisi and the mainline tech tree Italian cruisers, which is interesting. Of course, we haven't seen what an Italian light cruiser line would look like, so having premium versions of that is pretty cool. I just think that Gonzaga is a more interesting version of that. More extreme on the DPM side of things, has the torpedo angles that are easier to use, alongside the engine boost to get you in and out of situations a little bit more. It is harder, though, to play than Messina. The absolute power of Gonzaga is a little higher, but it's more challenging to make use of. The playstyle, though, is very, very similar, I will say. And armor-wise, I mean, 25, 27, a bit of 30. Very exposed Citadel here on Messina. We'll look at the build in a second here. Yeah, 150 only. At least we're not getting sap Citadel by Columbos, for example, but it's very large and very exposed. We have a 13.1 kilometer detect with the build that I was running towards the end of things. It's kind of what I settled on here. I really liked the extra alpha damage from this heavy HE and sap shells, but we don't get 11.3 detect. It's 13.1. That hurts because, of course, that 15% penalty to our detection here. If we then move over to Gonzaga and just pull that same build over, we still get 8.9 detect because our guns are only 135s. And because it's sap, they still pen 38, which is getting you over the vast majority of major armor thresholds. So consistency there is going to feel rather similar if you can lead. Gonzaga shells tend to get a little bit slow at these longer ranges, and it doesn't have nearly the range. Harder to play, but I think more interesting. And I've done my very best to not just rant again about the nested loot boxes and the gambling-only nature of these new ships, because I just want to ignore that and play the game. It's not fun for me to rant about that kind of thing. I much prefer to play the game and talk about what I am enjoying. But we do have to mention the monetization here. Gonzaga gets you most of the playstyle, more fun in my opinion, harder to play again, but more fun of Messina, and it's just available for direct purchase, guys. Your RNG rolling on average, you're getting one of these drops from the Nian's treasure containers in like $200 on average. You can get unlucky from there. And then it's 1 in 6 within there if you're going to get Messina, if you're interested in it. But just get Gonzaga, man. Just get Gonzaga if you at all are interested in this playstyle. It's available for a direct purchase. You know how much money exactly that it costs. You can do the math. You can decide if that is worthwhile to you. A small reminder that you can always use a 25% off coupon here. This does recharge from time to time, so it's not too bad for you to use it, especially on some of these tier 9s. In fact, it's a better discount using this on a tier 9 than the Black Friday variants of tier 9s, because the Black Friday tier 9 discount and tier 10 discount is 15%, not 25 like we see here. So anything tier 9, tier 10, you use that coupon. It's like you're getting a better discount than you even would on a Black Friday version. So Gonzaga then goes down to like 13,725 doubloons, which for tier 9 is not too bad these days. It's still expensive, right? It's still expensive, but It's no $200 and then also gambling if you get the 1 in 6. That's assuming you get it to drop in $200 worth of containers. It's crazy, guys. It's absolutely crazy to me, the monetization of this event. I ranted about that in a previous video, so I'm doing my best to not here, but I do not like it, and I will always wargaming. If it's gambling only, I'm always going to bring it up, and I'm always going to be unhappy with it. It's always going to be a criticism. At least give us an Admiral pack. I mean, Admiral packs themselves are so expensive too, but at least it's a direct purchase. We know exactly what we're getting for our money, not just some nebulous random chance. I hate that. I absolutely hate that. Here's the build that I was running though towards the end. We have so much HP base that I was foregoing Survivability Expert, as well as we kind of need that third smoke in my opinion, and we get an extra heal here too, so that's why I was running that way as well. And then here are the upgrades. I would highly recommend going steering gears. Felt a lot more comfortable to play that way. If you're willing to go full Lighthouse, which is more challenging, then you go steering gears here and then propulsion mod here. And you're a little more maneuverable yet again. But that gets pretty challenging to make use of. So that's about it for the Messina, at least for now. I will need to cover the battleship yet again and some of the other ships that are in these containers too, as you might need a little refresher on some of the Dockyard ships that came back. Some interesting ships in these containers. I'm very, very disappointed that the only way to get them, these ships coming back, is to gamble on them for absurd amounts of money. It's maybe a bit the worst feeling because you miss the Dockyard, which everybody seems to agree is one of the best value events that Wargaming puts on. Initial Dockyards, if you do all the missions, are honestly incredible. Some of the best events they ever do. And then for those ships to come back, you feel bad you missed out on it. And the only way they come back is for absurd prices that you have to gamble on. That's horrible. That's horrible. Okay, I'm going to go on another rant. Before I do, let me end the video. Thank you very much for watching and have a great rest of your day.